you very much for joining. We will be joined by Ms. Rumina Khurshid Alam. She is representing Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, Pakistan, and she was also at COP26. We are joined by Mr. Horgren, who is representing Green Party and member of the EU Parliament, Sweden. We have been joined by, we will be joined by, actually after some time, by Mr. Jutta Gotterend, and we have been joined by Professor Siegfried Blaes, who is Conservative Party Germany, and also Ms. Hilgard Bentere. She is member of European People's Party. And the format is that the technical presentation will be given by Mr. Hartmut Behrendt, who is coordinator Pakistan German Climate and Energy Initiative. He has joined us physically over here. We have been joined by Mr. Thomas Siller, who chaired the affairs delegation of the European Union to Pakistan, who is physically here. We will be joined by Mr. Riaz Patiana, MNA and convener Parliamentary Task Force on Sustainable Development Goals, Government of Pakistan. He will be here in a while. And this session would be moderated by our Executive Director, Dr. Abid Qayyum Sarari. He is also a member of many parliamentary committees, many parties of the government, and his role is to provide advices on different issues to the government and for the climate change as well. And with this short background, I'll now invite Mr. Hartmut to please give us a little background and set the scene for our panelists and for the audience. You have 8 to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Mrs. Chairman, for the 8 to 10 minutes. Good morning, dear members of the Parliament. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, gentlemen. At first, before starting my presentation, my name is Hartmut Behrendt. I'm the coordinator of the Climate and Energy Initiative between Pakistan and Germany on behalf of the German International Corporation, GIZ. And when Dr. Abid Suleri, the head of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, and me were sitting together to plan this session, we planned the 9th of December because we were very sure on the 8th of December, Germany will have a new parliament. And this parliament will put into the forefront climate change, which happened since yesterday afternoon. And that in the paper of the coalition, the climate and energy initiatives are very, very strong. We are the first climate and energy initiative, which had been launched just 1 month ago on COP26. And with this, I like to start with my presentation. Can you play the presentation? Okay, I think we have to start with the first slide. No, this is not the first slide. We have to go, yes. So the name of this panel is COP26 and the way ahead, about the role of the parliament in climate politics and implementation of the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. So we would like to pose you a lot of questions today because we are very curious. Here some of the questions as example. What is the role of national EU parliaments in combating climate change? Was COP26 able to significantly further the implementation of the Paris Agreement? What is the role of national parliaments in combating climate change? How can Pakistan, Germany, and the EU play their role in enhancing the efforts in the combat about climate change? And how can Germany and the EU support Pakistan in tackling climate change? Next slide, please. To discuss this, we were able to invite some members of the Parliament of Pakistan, of the EU, and of Germany. Next slide, please. They were already introduced. So I just give you some of the reasons why especially we invited not only Germany, but Sweden. So at first, coming to Germany, I'm German, you know. Germany started with to handle climate change in the Parliament since 1987. It was the first country of the world. So we started with an enquete commission in 1990. We had the first legislation on climate politics, on climate change. and in 1997 on renewable energies. Sweden was much more ahead with environmental politics with 1972 and the Stockholm Convention. Then I personally enjoyed very much being under the, Mrs. Margret Wallström in the European Commission, who was commissioner on environment from 1999 to 2004, and who was so strong to forward climate politics. Without her, we would not be there where we are today. And afterwards received a continuous high support on this agenda from Sweden, and especially they're the forerunners in energy efficient houses. We can learn a lot of them. Thank you. Now, a bit about, for the audience, about the importance of the COP. The COP is, of course, there for forwarding the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which has since COP26 a new target to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And COP, the 26 years now, like the 24th year SPPI, so on the average we are together 50 years, to come back to the COP. It's a cooperation of all the nations in the world. It's meanwhile the biggest international process, and the milestone was the Paris Agreement 2015, which really brought finally an agreement of the whole world how to limit global warming. We have here especially the national determined contributions. Currently, we did not arrive even at the 2 degrees, but we are on the best way. And one important milestone is, of course, climate finance to support developing country partners for adapting to climate change, for mitigating climate change. Next slide, please. Now, I try to summarize just the most important outcomes of this COP. The target was increased from 2 to 1.5 degrees to limiting climate change at 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level, which is very, very challenging because we are already at 1.2 degrees and we have a lot more to do than we did until now. The other one, we received more ambitious nationally determined contributions, especially from Pakistan, but still we are above 2 degrees above the pre-industrial level. We had a lot of pledges to net zero emissions by 2015, and we had the initiatives on methane and forestry. We had to postpone the commitments of the commitment to provide to developing countries $100 billion per year, at least from 2020 to 2023. But we committed ourselves to double the climate finance to developing countries for adapting to climate change by 2025 from now on. And the Paris rulebook, which are the guidelines, the laws, how to implement the Paris Agreement, has been finalized. Next slide, please. Now for the way ahead. The challenges are indeed the implementation of the next NDCs due 2025, which has to be increased a lot because there's a big way to go from 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees. Then the transparency initiative is a central cornerstone where we really can prove, are the numbers which are reported by the different countries, are this the real numbers? And then, of course, stepping up of climate finance to support developing countries is an important subject, mainly in adaptation to the adverse effects of climate change, but also in the implementation of the nationally determined contributions. And with this, some important other issues I want to highlight. This is at first, Pakistan played a very crucial role on COP26, and I'm very sure that with these initiatives, we together would play a crucial role, Pakistan and Germany together. Pakistan delivered a lot stronger on NDCs 1 week before the COP, and the EU, like always, played the mayor role, and the EU Parliament gained in recent years a lot on influence. We will for sure hear much more about this from Per Holmgren and other colleagues. But every country has to play its individual role. And climate change, even if we mitigate emissions as much as possible, climate change will continue. It will just, the global warming will just diminish in comparison to before. and all outcomes of COP26 are strong incentives already for climate investments, green bonds. And I think this is something we should look very much how this develops in the future. We are together. Thank you very much. And with this, I think we open the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernd, for your very concise, very crispy, and full of energy presentation. So not only that you discussed energy, but the delivery was quite energetic. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in Glasgow, one of the positive achievements of Pakistan, as Mr. Bernhard told us, was signing up an agreement with the Germans, cooperation on energy. And this is what he was highlighting. And of course, there are many other areas, especially when we talk of clean investment, green bonds, climate investment, green bonds. So it is some of the innovative means of organizing green financing, where some of the other instruments are like debt swapping for nature and green scoop bond, etc. But I'm glad that Germany is thinking about some of them. Now, I have on my panel with me, is Ms. Romina Khurshid online? Okay. She's in Poland, one of our MPs attending a meeting of International Parliamentary Union. So as soon as she comes in line, we'll take her there. So can I take advantage of the presence of, I have Mr. Holmgren, Green Party, member of EU Parliament, Sweden.
I'm here. Thank you. Good morning.
Yes, Mr. Holmgren, in this globalized world, of course, when we are talking of achieving these climate smart goals, when we are talking of achieving the Glasgow Climate Pact, we know that no single country can do it on its own. We know that we require cooperation, not only North-North cooperation, but also North-South and South-South cooperation. And in this context, of course, role of Sweden is quite important. And Pakistani audience who are sitting here, perhaps they would like to learn from your vast experience how we can promote such cooperation, and B, how our parliamentarians in Pakistan, they can take some of the cues from the European parliamentarians and the green parties which exist in the Europe to take this green and clean Pakistan agenda forward in the parliament. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Really nice to be in Pakistan, although I'm physically here in Brussels. I'm a member of the European Parliament, as you said, a member of the Green Group. I am from Sweden. I'm a meteorologist, climate scientist. I've been working with climate change ever since I was a PhD student, which is quite a long time ago now, some 30 years ago. And of course, we need a lot of cooperation between the countries and the different parts of the world. And from one perspective, you could say that Sweden has done a lot, not the least, as Mr. Berndt said already back in 1972 with the then Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme taking action with the Stockholm Conference on clean air, and also the fact that it was one of my older colleagues, Bert Bolin, who was the first chair for IPCC, a Swedish professor in meteorology who was chairing IPCC throughout the 90s, you could say. But at the same time, I think in this global perspective, we must never forget that after all, it is countries like Sweden and Germany and the rest of Europe, and of course also the United States, that actually are responsible for the vast majority of the greenhouse gases now present in the atmosphere. So not only do we need to take action, we also really, if you ask me, need to take that responsibility. And sometimes, from my point of view, from a green point of view, some of the leaders in the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen and Frans Timmermans, often talks about the fact that, yes, we do have some sort of leadership. And yes, I do think that especially Frans Timmermans took a very good role in COP26 when it came to negotiations with the other countries. But I still think that we need to be very really scrutinize the actual action and the policies from the European Union and the European countries. Because if we look at our own NDCs, they're not in line with the Paris Agreement. If you're looking at the Climate Action Tracker, as just one example, who's trying to really scrutinize all the NDCs from all the countries of the world, their result is roughly that if each and every country in the world would have a similar climate ambition as we have here in the European Union, we would end up in something like 2.5 to 3 degrees by the end of the century. And also, of course, when it comes to financing loss and damage, climate adaptation, and not the least, everything concerning climate justice, there Europe and United States, and of course Canada, and hopefully in the long run countries like Australia, etc., and the UK, they're not anymore a part of the real European Union family, unfortunately. But all these countries really need to step forward to take that responsibility when it comes to climate justice. Not the least in perspective that there are, of course, a few countries in Asia with very fast growing economies. And of course, hopefully a country like Pakistan can make some sort of leapfrog, as you usually call it, when it comes to technique, and not get stuck in the fossil dependency that a country like China has been now for the last few decades. And that is very, very important. But I really want to stress that I never think it's never right or just to put the blame or the responsibility on growing economies in Asia. The major responsibility must still be in the really rich countries of the world, like many European countries who's been releasing greenhouse gases now for more than 200 years. And of course, the task ahead of us, being able to hopefully at least remain near 1.5 degrees towards the end of the century is a huge task. As Mr. Berendt said, we're already at 1.2 degrees, and we have a global warming rate at roughly 0.2 degrees per decade, a little bit more actually than 0.2. And that means, of course, that we will reach 1.5 degrees in the beginning of the next decade. And with the current ambitions, we will reach 2 degrees sometimes in the 2050s. But then after, we could, with climate neutrality on a global scale by mid-century, we could then hopefully at least decrease the global temperature towards the end of this century, and hopefully theoretically still be able to be within reach of 1.5 degrees. But still, with 1.5 degrees and some sort of stabilization when it comes to greenhouse gases and global warming itself, the climate change will still continue with rising sea levels for centuries, or in worst case, even millennia ahead. And one of the most touching meetings we had for the delegation from the European Parliament in Glasgow was with the delegation from the Maldives, and also, of course, with Bangladesh. And you know, there's a lot of countries and a lot of people living in coastal areas which will be very, very strongly affected already during this century. And then when it comes to sea level rise, that will continue for many, many centuries ahead. So that is some sort of summary from me. Briefly, I could say, of course, also that when it comes to the overall action at COP26, when you asked the question about the outcome, which I've had quite a lot of questions from journalists, etc., if it was a good or a bad outcome, I think it really has a lot to do with your expectations. And personally, my expectations for the COP26 wasn't that high. And with that expectation going to Glasgow, I still need to say that some of the things that happened in Glasgow, I think, can be very, very important for the continuation. I mean, you could say that this was the first high-level climate meeting, the first COP, where at least more or less every country in the world agree upon the fact that we do have a common huge problem, and the main root to the problem is the use of fossil energy. And that hasn't been voiced with such power and clarity during previous COPs. And although the ambitions are still far too low in the long run, I think you could compare this maybe at least with what happened in Montreal in the 80s, when we had to do something about the emissions of all these other gases destroying the ozone layer. And the ambitions then from the countries and the politicians were also a bit too low. But once that framework were put in place, the market reacted much faster than the actual political ambitions in Montreal. And hopefully that will happen now as well. So that is probably the most important thing, if you ask me. Thank you very much. Hope to be able to return with more thoughts later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for elucidating the Sweden's position. Of course, developing countries, they are equally disappointed from the outcome of COP Glasgow. And I know that the members of Green parties, wherever they are, they would be slightly disappointed with this glass half full. But let me come to Ms. Catherine Hanberger, member of Green Party in Germany. Congratulations, ma'am, for yesterday's Green Party's yet again arrival in the coalition. I could see out of 16 new ministers, 8 women, 8 men. What an equality. And we do hope that the presence of the Green Party in German coalition that would bring some ray of hope for climate financing from developed world, especially on loss and damage control mechanism, which was easily ignored in Glasgow. And perhaps that's where I wanted to ask you that how justified you think that we sitting in developing countries, when we talk of loss and damage control mechanism, something on top of climate financing fund, so can we rely on the global south? Can we rely on the green parties in the north so that we could see something concrete happening on it?
We would
Sorry,
love to
sorry,
be-
if I may request, can you please just arrange your camera a little bit, because we're taking videos from this for social media as well. Thank you very much. Stage is yours.
we would love to build strong partnerships with our partners, with states, as also with the civil society of the global south. For us, the Green Party in Germany, it's our historic responsibility to be there if the climate crisis is already affecting other parts of the regions. Because Germany, especially as a high industrial nation, is responsible for what happens right now. And especially my region, the Rhineland in West Germany, we have huge coal mines. We have 2 coal power plants, which are the biggest polluter of Europe. So we call our region the main source of Europe, the main source of CO2 in Europe. So for me, it's also my local responsibility. I know that I'm in the German parliament, that I try my best to act globally. And the topic of climate crisis is inside the hands of the Green Ministry for Foreign Affairs, as also as the Ministry of Economics, Climate and Energy. So I look forward to build really strong alliance with you in the future. And we have to step up our game. We have to give more finance, and we have to go forward in new technologies, and we have to share this knowledge. For me, especially, it's very important also to recognize that on the international level, also in our country, in my country, Germany, it's really key to a good climate policy. It's really important to empower women, that women have to be on a negotiation table, that we can only achieve climate justice with achieving gender justice. And this is also one topic at the UN Climate Conference, what is dear to my heart, to support other women, to support groups of women, so that they also can be a part of the negotiation table. And so this is also something we would love to do in the future more, to support especially these groups, especially parts also of civil society who are fighting for gender justice inside the climate policy. So this is something really important to us.
And just a supplementary question, in Glasgow, Pakistan and Germany, they signed this agreement on energy cooperation, and we know that energy transition is a quite important commitment from Pakistan's side. Prime Minister of Pakistan is quite clear that by 2030, 60% of our energy mix should be from renewables. And in that context, this transfer of technology is quite important beside financing. So financing is one thing, but transfer of technology, relaxing maybe some of the IP, intellectual property rights for such technologies to be replicated in developing countries. So do you foresee any plans in the German new government to do so?
Yes, I mean, key also to a good climate policy is listen to the voices of the Global South. And so for me, it's really important to know what are the needs and what are the demands, and then to follow up. So to build up on this agreement, also we in Germany, we want to have 80% green technology, green energy until 2030. So we should work closely together on that topic and transform our economy, our energy system together, and to transfer also our technology, whatever you need.
Would you like to add any comment on it?
I just wanted to show that we are working, we are starting working together. We are here sitting here together to work together.
Thank you, thank you.
And maybe if I can add something.
Yes, please.
For me, it's also very important to learn from other countries as well, because Germany does not know every solution, and that's what I learned at the UN Climate Conference. It's very important to listen to other countries, to other regions, because there are a lot of knowledge and solutions we have to learn from in Germany, so that we build a partnership where we learn from each other. That would be very important for me.
Thank you. And I know you have to leave in next couple of minutes. If I can ask my last question, and that's about the carbon market mechanism. Pakistan and many other developing countries, we do have initiatives that we feel we can trade in this carbon market mechanism under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So any comments from your side how we can actually enhance our marketability?
So yes, we also have to work together on that issue. For me, if I may say that, for me, it's not the only solution or a really good solution to combat the climate crisis. So I'm a little bit skeptic about mechanism like carbon trade. I'm more a very practical woman, and I look more in the direction of what can we do really right now to shut down our coal power plants in Germany, which would be very, very important. So I think it's very important to look more on what can we do directly and what can we do now, and not believe that only, yes, the carbon market mechanism would save us.
Well, I completely agree with you. This replacement of phasing out of this fossil fuel to phasing down of fossil fuel in the Glasgow climate pact, I think that was a big blow and a big jerk to all the campaigners who wanted to see fossil fuel phased out gradually. But hopefully, for the first time, it was actually incorporated in UNFCCC text. So again, we have to keep our joint work together. So I know, Ms. Hinberger, you have to leave. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will definitely make sure to have further dialogues where Pakistani MPs and European MPs, they can actually talk to each other to learn from each other's experience. And next on my panel is Professor Siegfried Ballis, Conservative Party, Germany. Are you online, Professor Ballis?
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm very glad to be virtual with you on this line, and many greetings to Islamabad. First of all, I made to introduce myself. I had been for 18 years the mayor of the city of Erlangen, which is situated north Bavaria, and I have also been the speaker of the European Metropolitan Region of Nuremberg. And under my rule there, we defined already 10 years ago very ambitious goals for our region, which consists nearly of all over northern Bavaria. And as you have invited me not as a member of a parliament, because we heard already a member of the European Parliament, we heard already a member of the German Parliament, but I'm representing the local government level, and here politics becomes concrete. And my proposal is, what can we do in the cooperation between Germany and Pakistan? What can we do in the cooperation between the European Union and Pakistan? And as Pakistan is the 5th largest nation of the world, you have a very, very important role in this process. And I think you have a very good prerequisite for a cooperation with the industrialized countries. And now you may ask, how should this work? I'm quite convinced that we can only succeed in beating climate change if we are decarbonizing our economy. And how can this work? This can work only on the basis of a hydrogen economy. This means we have to substitute the fossil resources by hydrogen. But we in Germany, we have a lack of green hydrogen. So Germany and the European Union and all the industrialized countries, they have to import green hydrogen wherever it can be produced. First of all, of course, we are looking on the North African states, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and so, which are very close to Germany. But Pakistan has great resources in the field of sun power and even in wind power, and you can produce renewable hydrogen. And the competition is, or the challenge is, how to transport this green hydrogen to Germany or to the European Union. But we have now very good possibilities for the transportation of hydrogen from ever in the world. You are producing it, maybe from Pakistan, maybe from the North African states to the European Union or to Germany. So my conclusion is hydrogen is the new oil, and who is prepared to produce this green hydrogen, this country will be a very important and preferred partner of the industrialized countries, especially Germany and the European Union. And Mr. Holmgren knows that the European Parliament passed a hydrogen strategy in July last year. We also have a hydrogen strategy in Germany, and we also have a hydrogen strategy in the country I'm coming from. This is Bavaria. So I'm quite convinced in beating the climate change, we have to cooperate in the field of the hydrogen economy. And I'm convinced that Pakistan can play here a very, very important role. And I repeat it, hydrogen is the new oil.
Yes, sure. Hydrogen is a new oil, and obviously the technology to convert it into fuel, it's still under process, and Pakistan need to acquire that technology too. I have with me our lady parliamentarian, Ms. Romina Khurshid, who is sitting, I think, at some airport in Poland. Romina, thanks for joining. Romina, we were just trying to make it an interactive session with the European parliamentarians. You have listened to some of the discussion. Any question from your side on parliamentary cooperation that you, being Pakistani parliamentarian, would like to see happening between Pakistan and between European parliaments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Abid Suleri. It's a great honor, and it's, in fact, indeed, it's a great learning by listening my other parliamentarian colleagues from EU Parliament and from other sides too. And my most greeting and regards to all the colleagues who are sitting here and listening virtually and watching us. As we have attended the Glasgow COP26, and in which we have seen so much, we have learned so much. I strongly believe that it's very important and need of the time that the European, as the parliamentarians, I always believe that they can play a huge role as being a bridge among the countries. As the previous speaker, honorable member of the parliament from Germany, has mentioned a lot of things, lots of suggestions and the good suggestions. And as he mentioned about the position of the Pakistan, that what important position we are holding. And other than that, if on the world map, if you'll see the position of Pakistan, it's somewhere in the center. I always, as being a Pakistani, I always call it a heart among the world, and which can create lots of connectivity. But other than that, if we talk about the developing countries, and those are in the phase of below than the developing too, I think it's very much needed of our as being a member of a parliamentarians, because we are the voice of the people, by the people, and because of the people. So I think it's so much more important to do as put the pressure on those developed countries because of them who are suffering, and then the transfer of technology, that how the transfer of technology can play an important role, and then come up with the important legislations in specifically as being as we have witnessed in the COP26, that if one country is having any issue, we cannot come up with a proper draft, and we not everyone can come up with this thing. So I think majority should have to be authority, and then the voting process, and then other. I think these things also need to be looked after into it, and as SDPI and other global think tanks who are working a lot on the climate change sector, I think it's very much important and needed, and need of the time, because I don't think so that we have much more time left, because as we remember that ozone layer, I again and again mentioned that when we were used to child, I used to hear a lot about the ozone hole. So I think now everyone forgot, but the things are there. And same example with the MDGs to SDGs, that how the MDGs we couldn't achieve, and then we transferred it to SDGs. But now I think there is not much time needed. First of all the parliamentarians, I might request, and that how we can come up with this thing, that how I believe that we need to come up on the emergency actions on the climate change, which is very much required, because as much like we have breath enough, but I don't think so the way things are moving on, our kids going to have this liberty. And I'm of course I believe that moreover networking, moreover sessions, moreover having connection with each other, meeting each other, learning from each other, can bring up more suggestions and more issues. And then specifically, as SDP has taken a great initiative of caucus on renewable energy, I think that is also a need of a time on which we need to come up with more actions, and we need to bring more member of parliaments from across the globe, which can come up with the weight and with moreover determination. Thank you so very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Romina. This is again a very powerful commitment, and of course clarity about cooperation. We wish you a happy flight and a happy return to Pakistan. But thanks for making it happen. And
always my pleasure.
Thank you. Let me come back to Professor Bellis again. Professor, this is about the issue of climate financing. So we know that there was a pledge in Paris, $100 billion per annum by 2020, which could never got materialized. And now we are again talking of this pledge to be reconsidered along with the more increased ambitions. So while many of the countries, including Pakistan, we have provided our quite ambitious NDCs, when can we expect any progress on this climate financing? Your take on it? Please unmute yourself.
Okay, yes. First of all, I have to mention that the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development has raised its funds for developing countries in cooperation with climate policy from 4 to 5 billion euro. And I'm quite convinced that the new ministry, Mrs. Schulze, which was appointed yesterday in the German Bundestag, she will continue this way. And as the Green Party, as one prominent partner in the new coalition claimed, she also wants to design a climate exterior policy. So I'm quite convinced that Germany will invest more money in the cooperation with developing countries or with the global South. And I'm quite sure that there will be many other private investments in this sector. Because, as you know, Germany is not able to produce the green hydrogen in their own country. Germany will depend on import of green hydrogen as it is dependent actually in the import of oil, for example. So I'm quite sure that those people who are ambitious in this field and explore and invest, for example, in photovoltaic, invest in wind energy, they will have a very good competitive advantage to other countries. So I only can say, and there is a wonderful report Mr. Behrendt can talk about. His institution published, I think 2 years ago, a wonderful report about the importance of sun power in Pakistan. And actually, you have only a percentage of 2% of your energy supply from sun energy, but you have sun from morning to evening and many days in the year. Though this is a resource, you have nothing to pay for it, and you have to use this resource. And you should invite not only governments to cooperate with Pakistan to use the sun power, but you should also invite private investors to invest in such photovoltaic areas, or invest, for example, in wind farms which are established in Pakistan. And I also want to add that, for example, if I look to China, I've been in China 3 years ago. They have built already huge photovoltaic farms of some square kilometers large. And I think this is a wonderful chance and opportunity also for Pakistan to gain money from producing green hydrogen and producing clean energy.
Thank you very much for these practical suggestions. I'm sure that Pakistani parliamentarians sitting on the floor and join online, they would be taking account of it. And you mentioned about this report that Mr. Holmgren has written in Sweden. Before I come to Ms. Helgard Bentel, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Can you quickly go to Mr. Parr and just ask him about this report? If you like to share any of the finding what Pakistan needs to do to explore the potential of solar energy here. Mr. Parr.
All right, I think you addressed the wrong person now, because I haven't written such a report. I think you were referring to Mr. Behrendt, wasn't you? Yeah, I think so. But so I'm glad to offer the possibility for Mr. Behrendt to ask that question. Thank you.
So next on my list is Ms. Bentela, European People's Party. Again, on this whole issue of cooperation, this North-South cooperation, and can we expect anything better in Egypt next year, while we'll be meeting again for COP27? Okay, so I think she's not there. We have Ms. Guteland, member EU Parliament from Sweden. Ma'am, the same question to you. Should we expect something different in Sharm el-Sheikh next year when we'll be meeting in COP27, especially some more commitments from Global North, as Global South is trying to play its role through increased ambitions in the NDCs?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. And the short answer is yes. I hope and I think that Egypt will be putting the positions forward when it comes to some of the obstacles that were there in Glasgow. I think what the professor mentioned about Germany is probably what we see. And I also think that Glasgow was about, if I should say three things, then I think Glasgow was about trust, about the trust between developing countries and the big emitters, and also the discussion on climate financing and damage and loss. Then Glasgow was also about lots of pledges, new countries coming forward saying they would do much more. And that's of course good, but it was in the long term and you're not sure until that's put into action. And therefore, my third word for this conference was that it was very clear that we need action. And that is what we need this upcoming year, both in front of Egypt, but also for the global stock take that we have ahead of us in 2 years.
Thank you, Ms. Guteland. I'll again come back to you, but let me engage Mr. Riaz Fatiana here. Mr. Fatiana, he is the convener of Parliamentary Task Force on SDGs in the Parliament of Pakistan, both houses, both the National Assembly as well as Senate, and he was also present in Glasgow. So, Mr. Fatiana, can I take your quick remarks and how you can foresee some sort of collaboration between Pakistani parliamentarians and European parliamentarians and taking this agenda for tackling climate change forward?
Thank you, Mr. Abbas. Really, I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abbas. Mr. Braderick Herbert, Mr. Thomas Saylor, Ms. Mariam, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. First of all, I'm really grateful to SDPI who gave me an opportunity to attend COP26 conference at Glasgow this year. That was a good opportunity to learn more about climate action and climate change. As you know, now we are completed around quarter century when we started this campaign for climate from Rio. From Rio to Glasgow, we crossed many good events like that was a good start in Rio, then in Tokyo, then in Paris, and now at Glasgow. But question is that in 25 years, mostly we see promises, implementation is yet to take off. And secondly, there is need to reduce emissions, and most emissions are produced by capitalist and rich and industrial countries. Pakistan's share is only 1%. This is very minimum, you can say. Our neighboring country is producing 13% of emission, and our one major biggest country of the Asia is producing 23%, and Europe, if you count America, they are producing more than 25%. So this is more responsibility lie to rich Europe, America, and other countries who are producing emissions to reduce how they can. once I was in China and 2 years before, I learned that China stopped and they decided to reduce and remove all coal power plants. But meanwhile, we were inviting and we were importing their removed power plants in Pakistan, coal power plants, and Saiwal power plant is one of their example. This is just nearby to our area, and we enhanced 2%, 2 centigrade temperature in our surrounding. So this is very important. So if we discuss Paris principles, that was a good document and very important start and initiative. Unfortunately, most rich countries, including the US, was reluctant to ratify that document, but Pakistan was the country who ratified even in same year and next year, 2016. But now this is good that when Mr. Obama received Nobel Prize, honorary Nobel Prize, US also signed this document as well. That was a good initiative from the organizers. Anyhow,
Fateh sir, what are your expectations from European parliamentarians for collaboration?
Through democratic way, we can involve our people and our legislators. And of course, in Parliament of Pakistan, we have 3 major mechanisms. One is Standing Committee on Climate Change. And that committee is very effective and monitoring the government policies working on climate change and action. Second big forum is our National Parliamentary Task Force on Sustainable Development Goals. And honorably, I'm chairing of this organization. This is a group of 60 members of parliament across the country and from all stakeholders, all political parties from Treasury as well as opposition benches. And third forum is Public Accounts Committee, which is monitoring spending of government on climate, so we can control extra and over some kind of nonsense expenditures. So through legislation, monitoring, evaluation, and to watch government policies, this is our mandate and domain of the parliament. Now, this is question how we can strengthen cooperation and coordination and correlation with other parliamentarians across the world. One forum is IPU, Interparliamentary Union. Once I was vice president in Panama Conference. So the second is European Union. And this is my personal knowledge that across the world, Europe is the region which have more concern with human rights, fundamental rights, as well as with climate. So Pakistan's parliament is ready to establish some kind of cooperation and coordination with the European Parliament, and we can sit together. There is a inter-Pakistan Parliament and European Union Friendship Group. Again, they are together. Anyhow, last I would like to say that there is need to work more. Pakistan is adopted many policies like we are more concentrate. We are more going to start alternate energy projects in the country. And secondly, we are encouraging electric vehicles policy. And we stopped any kind of cutting of present forest and jungles. So deforestation is our major concern and priority. And government announced and adopted 10 billion tree tsunami project. This is very important project, and every year, 2 times, especially in seasons of plantation in August and February, we planted many trees, and we involved all government departments, especially students and youth. We are working together that so our government, our parliament, our youth, our students, everyone is on one page, that is to plant more trees and to reduce size of emission, and of course to work according to Paris principles. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Mr. Any of the European parliamentarians, if you like to ask any question to Mr. Riaz Fatiana, and we have also been joined by Senator Faisal Javed. He was also present in Glasgow. He was busy in another parliamentary meeting, but for this session, he made himself yes. Yes, Ms. Guteland, would you like to ask any question to the Pakistani parliamentarians?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. And it was so interesting to listen, and many things felt like things we have in common. I'm thinking about also the project in planting the trees. I think that is, of course, extremely important. I have one question, no, not question, more like an observation, because I agree with what's said in the beginning that the big responsibility is on the biggest emitters, and they need to deliver, and that goes for my home region, the European Union. We need to deliver, and that is, of course, both the trust that we talked about, that there is, of course, finance, the climate financing, loss and damage. We need to rebuild trust there, and I think the big emitters need to take more responsibility. So that's what the Parliament, the European Parliament, was pushing for also. But that said, the European Union is now developing a very clear measures to go faster in the transition the upcoming years. And we have not only the long-term target, we have also the sectorial targets with all the measures in the different sectors, like industry, energy, maritime sector is going to have legislation, better for aircraft, transport, building, you name it. Everyone is going to have tougher legislation. And that will also push innovation in the European Union. So we will be in the forefront when it comes to the best jobs, the future jobs, technology development. And I must say, as an advice, that if developing countries come behind this transition too, that will be an economic catastrophe for the future. So even if one doesn't have the same responsibility, we need to build measures to help different countries to come into this transition and have the newest technology and be part of this transition. Otherwise, we will once again have a very unfair world where the European Union will have the new jobs, the better technology, and other countries will be stuck with older technologies. So this is also something I think we need to have in the discussion. So this is really something that concerns many and should concern, and because it's not like the European Union is going to be a loser here when we transist. We are probably going to be the winners. And I think that's also what the industry understands now. So I just want to have that dimension. This is not only about unfair and not unfair to transist. It's about opportunity to transist also. But then I know the means are not there, and that's true. So we need to also help each other to have better means to do that job. And that is, of course, the climate financing. And there, I think the European Union should contribute.
Very much, very valid observations and suggestions. Of course, it's a collective agenda, and all of us, we need to work on it collectively. I can't see, is there anyone that I haven't invited online? Okay, so that brings me to Senator Faisal Javed, who is a member of the Treasury benches in Pakistan. As I said, that he was also in Glasgow with Mr. Riaz Fatiana. Both of them, they were representing Treasury benches there. Senator, what were your expectations from the developed world in Glasgow, and how satisfied you are once you are back? Did some of your expectations, those were met?
Well, thank you. Good to be here. Well, regarding expectations, I would say, you see, what happened in 2009, then in 2015, the Paris Agreement. I think there has to be more of a practical approach to this whole thing. All commitments those were made earlier have not been fulfilled. You know, Pakistan pledged a case of all developing countries at the COP as well, at the IPU forum as well. At Interparliamentary Union meeting at Glasgow, we talked about how we are concerned that developed countries really need to sort of developed countries. And for example, take Pakistan's case here. Pakistan contributes less than 1% of the global greenhouse emissions, but yet we are among top 10 countries that are constantly affected by, mostly by climate change. But despite resource constraints, Pakistan has taken a lot of measures in terms of addressing this global issue, fighting climate change. Pakistan took a lot of measures. For example, Pakistan became the first country in the world to meet the International Bond Challenge, and challenge was of restoring over 350,000 hectares of land into forest. Pakistan restored over 600,000 hectares of land into forest and planted over 1 billion trees in the KP province. And now we have launched another campaign of planting 10 billion trees across Pakistan. Out of that 10 billion, we have already planted over 1.5 billion trees. So, and also Pakistan met the UN UN Climate Action Goal SDG 13, and that too a decade before the deadline. And then Pakistan also planted the largest Miyawaki urban forest in the world in Lahore. So, I mean, there are a lot of initiatives that Pakistan has taken, the Clean Green Pakistan Index, and also by 2030, the overall energy mix of Pakistan will be converted to clean energies, to 60% of it by 2030. And out of 100 vehicles, 30 will be on electric by 2030. So 30% of vehicles will be on electric by 2030. And Pakistan has further pledged to reduce even the less than 1% of the greenhouse emission. We're going to reduce it further by 50% by, say, 2030. So Pakistan is taking a lot of measures. There is commitment, a practical approach there in terms of addressing this global issue. But expectation from the developed countries is that they should make things happen now, practically. $100 billion a year coming to developing countries hasn't seen the light yet. और थोड़ी उर्दू में बात करूंगा. I love to speak in उर्दू. देखिए, पाकिस्तान ने अपना मुद्दा जो है वो बयान किया है COP26 पर भी, कि पाकिस्तान डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज की इसलिए बार बार बात करता है कि हम लोग इस प्रॉब्लम में कंट्रीब्यूटर नहीं, हम तो विक्टिम है क्लाइमेट चेंज का. मौसमियाती तब्दीलियों का पाकिस्तान उसके अंदर प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. पाकिस्तान सॉल्यूशंस की तरफ जा रहा है. और पाकिस्तान ने जो मेजर्स लिए हैं, इसके बावजूद कि इस जो ग्रीन हाउस एमिशंस हैं ग्लोबल, उसका 1% से कम पाकिस्तान का हिस्सा है उसके अंदर, लेकिन उसके बावजूद पाकिस्तान बहुत ज्यादा इकदामात कर रहा है. आज से 4 साल पहले क्लाइमेट चेंज की यहाँ बात भी नहीं होती थी, एनवायरनमेंट की कोई बात भी नहीं करता था. और अब देखिए STPI ने जिस तरह से ये कॉन्फ्रेंस रखी है और यहाँ पे भी बात हो रही है, दुनिया भर से पार्लियामेंटेरियंस जो हैं वो इस पे बात कर रहे हैं. हमारे यहाँ जो कैंपेन्स लॉन्च की प्राइम मिनिस्टर इमरान खान साहब ने, पहले खैबर पख्तूनख्वा में जब हमारी गवर्नमेंट थी, तो हमने एक चैलेंज ले लिया कि 3.5 लाख एकड़ जमीन जो है उसको हरियाली में कन्वर्ट करना है. पाकिस्तान ने उससे डबल जमीन को हरियाली में कन्वर्ट किया, कुछ 6 लाख से ज्यादा एकड़ बंजर जमीन को हरियाली में कन्वर्ट कर दिया। ये चैलेंज दुनिया का पहला मुल्क बना पाकिस्तान जिसने मीट किया। और उसके बाद 1 अरब दरख्त तो लगे खैबर पख्तूनख्वा में, उसके बाद 10 अरब दरख्त लगाने का मंसूबा जारी है, जिनमें से 1.5 अरब से ज्यादा दरख्त लग भी चुके हैं। और साथ ही में जो यूएन का क्लाइमेट एक्शन गोल है SDG 13, वो पाकिस्तान ने मुकर्रर जो हदफ था उससे 10 साल पहले उसको अबूर किया है। ये बहुत बड़ी कमाल है। और फिर जो पाकिस्तान अब जो करने जा रहा है, जो ओवरऑल हमारा जो एनर्जी मिक्स है उसका 60% जो है वो क्लीन एनर्जी में पाकिस्तान शिफ्ट कर देगा 2030 तक। और जो गाड़ियां हर 100 में से 30 गाड़ियां जो है वो इलेक्ट्रिक पे चली जाएंगी 2030 में। तो ये बड़े इकदाम हैं। इसके साथ साथ मैंने बताया जैसे कि मियावाकी जो जापानीज टैक्सीज है 10 गुना तेजी से दरख्त उगता है उसमें, वो पाकिस्तान ने दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा जंगल लगा दिया लाहौर में, अर्बन फॉरेस्ट। ये एक कमाल और भी लग रहे हैं। साथ में हमारी कुछ और इनिशिएटिव्स लिए हैं कि कोविड टाइम्स के अंदर पाकिस्तान ने 15 नए नेशनल पार्क्स जो हैं वो अनाउंस किए हैं प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज इनिशिएटिव के तहत। और 10 डैम्स बनेंगे 10 सालों में। 10 years 10 डैम प्रोजेक्ट भी जारी है। और ये डेकेड ऑफ डैम्स जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने इसको जो है नाम दे दिया। तो बड़े कमाल इकदाम कर रहा है पाकिस्तान। लेकिन जरूरत इस अमर की है कि जो तरक्की याफ्ता ममालिक हैं वो जो तरक्की पजीर ममालिक हैं उनके साथ कोलैबोरेट करें, क्योंकि $100 बिलियन की बात हुई थी पेरिस एग्रीमेंट में, और उसको अभी तक प्रैक्टिकल अप्रोच उसको नहीं दी गई है, उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करके नहीं दिखाया है। ये बहुत जरूरी हो गया है और ये मुद्दा है पाकिस्तान का, और पाकिस्तान हर फोरम पे इस आवाज को उठाता रहेगा और बढ़ाता रहेगा। और आप सब भी जब भी बात करें तो इस पर जरूर बात करें कि ये सिर्फ हमारा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, सारी डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज का एक प्रॉब्लम है। और सब इस पे मुत्तफिक थे। IPU की मीटिंग में सारे वहां पे मुत्तफिक थे इस बात पे कि COP26 में भी बातें नहीं होनी चाहिए बल्कि काम होने चाहिए, और एक टेंजिबल मेजर्स जो है सामने टारगेट सेट करके उनको मीट करना चाहिए। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you, Senator. And Senator was explaining different initiatives that Pakistan has taken for ecosystem protection, preservation, and to tackle climate change. And his punchline was that without a strong collaboration and cooperation between Global South and Global North, many of these things perhaps those could not be sustained. My online honorable parliamentarians who has joined us online, would you like to ask any further comment from Senator Faisal or to Mr. Riaz Fatana before I could move to Mr. Thomas Salah, the last speaker of the day?
Yeah, I would like to. I raised my hand a few minutes ago, if that's possible. I would like to ask a bit more specific question. As my Swedish colleague Jette Guteland stated, that we're now in a situation also correlated to my first intervention during this meeting, that we're probably reaching now some sort of critical mass, and this transition will happen, which means that those in the forefront of the transition will be also the winners. I mean, back in the 90s, I was often quite frustrated that this transition didn't happen already back then. But back then, of course, if some country or some company would have been too fast in the transition, that would probably have been an economic loss. But now we're in a situation where, not the least when it comes to the issues that Professor Siegfried Balleys has raised as well, that we are running towards a future basically where we will see solar energy and hydrogen being the most important bricks in the future that we're building. And also the fact, of course, that when we're discussing climate justice or climate injustice, there are these major areas with generation geography, and also not to forget gender. So we're probably, if we're not doing this transition in a just way, there will be major problems, probably especially for the young women growing up in big areas of the world. So then my more specific question is, of course, then in which sectors and areas do you think that it will be most important that we really find good agreements and cooperations to cooperate between Pakistan and the European Union and the countries of Europe? Thank you.
Thank you very much, very encouraging. Mr. Fatehana, just concluding comment, we really wanted to know more about your SDG task force in the parliament, how effective it is. What is it that we can present to our European dignitaries when we talk of our parliamentarians task force and SDG, and what sort of collaboration perhaps they can offer?
After prolonged lockdown due to COVID, due to COVID pandemic, Parliament is now functional, and SDG Secretariat Pakistan National Task Force on Sustainable Development Goal is ready for establishment of cooperation among legislators from Pakistan as well as from European Union. So in the field of capacity building, research, and to start education on climate change, to improve our curriculum, research support, and exchange of our experiences. This need for to sit together and have some kind of cooperation.
To host a parliamentarians conference on SDGs sometime next year.
Yes, we are expected to organize the third Asia Regional Parliamentary seminar on SDGs in collaboration with IPU and other donors in the month of February next year, 2022. And some people from European can reach and join us as observer, because mostly Asian parliaments are being invited. But our friends from Europe, if they are intend to visit, yes, we can invite them as an observer.
I think on behalf of Mr. Fatehana, let me take the liberty to extend this invitation to our online dignitaries who are there to join that IPU's conference in Islamabad, either in online or in person. And the last comment from you, Mr. Senator Javed, I know that in the parliament you are, along with Fatehana Saab and other colleagues from opposition benches, you are in the process of announcing an energy transition caucus. Can you tell us briefly about that caucus? What purpose will it serve?
Yeah, I mean, it's a brainchild of yours. You would know about your baby more than anybody else. But I think it's a need of the hour. We need to, we have announced it in Glasgow as well. Malak Amin Aslam, who's advisor to the Prime Minister on climate change. And this parliamentary caucus will be established here in Islamabad. Members from the Senate and the National Assembly will be part of it. And you see, we need to have more engagements with global MPs. And there where we would seriously need support from all of you to sort of engage, and the targets that have been set by the Prime Minister, Imran Khan, we need to have a parliamentary oversight how things are moving towards that direction. A clear monitoring is required, and also if we can add more value to it from this platform of the parliamentary caucus, I think it's going to be very, very beneficial, because Pakistan is serious. Pakistan has to be serious, and energy transition is, of course, need of the hour. And that is why this caucus is being established. And hopefully, within next few days, it will be launched.
Thank you. Good news. And that brings me to Mr. Thomas Saleh, Shandy Affair Delegation of the European Union to Pakistan. Thanks very much for listening to the whole discussion very patiently. Of course, no single parliament of the world or no single parliament in any country can actually tackle the challenges of climate change. So in tackling this challenge and in the mission of leaving no one behind, which is the central theme of our conference, all actors and all stakeholders, they have to play their due role. So I just wanted to get your comment before I can hand over the mic to Mr. Bernhard for his closing remarks.
Mr. Soleri and all honored guests, Senator Mr. Fatiana, and honorable members of European Parliament. Should not forget my own people in a way. I'm obviously representing the executive here today, work in an oxygen-free room. But before I go more into substance, let me tell you, just 48 hours ago, Foreign Minister Qureshi visited Brussels and had a very, very good bilateral exchange with High Representative Borrell. Yeah, excuse me. I was just saying, not even 48 hours ago, Foreign Minister Qureshi visited Brussels and had a very long and very good bilateral exchange with High Representative Borrell. And one of the outcomes of this, what we call the strategic dialogue, was that we would intensify and reinforcing our cooperation, bilateral cooperation, EU with Pakistan on climate change. So that is something perhaps also to mention as a news at this conference today. We work very closely together with the parliaments. I'm now saying this in plural because it refers to the Senate and the National Assembly here. You mentioned, Mr. Fatiana, the Friendship Group, where I had already the honor to be myself. And there's a very good climate, a very good chemistry in working together. And we have obviously excellent contacts also to the EP in Brussels. This is indeed the thing, and you said it, Senator, just a minute ago, the cooperation between MEPs, MPs over the world, and the cooperation very concretely. And that's the point. You can have big conferences everywhere. You can have big gatherings. The question on all these climate change issues is to focus. You mentioned the energy transition. Yes, this is one of the focus, clearly. Everybody speaks about everything. Without focusing on climate change, you are not making a change. And that's definitely one of the key elements we have identified already quite some time. And I would also wish to add, as regarding Pakistan, you mentioned the figures, one of the 10 countries most affected, but only 1% contributing. In our financial envelope for the next 7 years, we actually also have included mitigation measures. We cannot only say, Pakistan, go ahead, do something. You have also to contribute. You have to do your thing. It is this whole question about the development and climate nexus. Yeah? And climate policy for us is also social policy. The consequences of climate change are not only in the nature. The consequences are down to local communities in your provinces. If you have droughts, by the way, as you have seen also in Afghanistan, to mention this in brackets, if you have floodings, if you have other concrete impacts on that. So we have seen this and we have taken this into account in cooperation with the government here, and there are mitigating measures planned over the next years, together also with climate change measures, obviously. What I would call parliamentarians upon, if you allow me to say, is engage much more than you do already with the industry. with the Pakistani industry and with the European industry. When Mr. Balais mentioned hydrogen research and development, it's a part where an engagement with the industry is required. All the progress in Europe we have made in terms of environmental protection and climate change would never have been possible without engagement by the industry, by car producers, by the heavy industry, even by the coal production industry, because at one point in time there is to be the readiness by the industry to follow the policy, to follow the political requirements. And that's perhaps also something on the cooperation level that we should look at. Is there a possibility to bring together much more industries on the two sides, European industries, Pakistani industries? That could also be a direct channel for energy transition policy, not only with all due respect to all the people engaged, not only at the purely political level, but also at the industrial and at the commercial level. I think that is a point that should definitely be made and be taken into account. But parliamentarians can be the vehicle for this. You have to push, and it is your task, you have to push the industries, the representatives of big companies, big producers, to help and to be engaged and to do concrete things. I repeat, the focus is what counts. When you were talking about projects next year regarding cooperation between parliaments, concrete setup here of groups, we are ready to facilitate to the extent possible between the European Parliament and you here, to whatever we can do. And that's obvious, is also our task as climate diplomats in a way here, and ready to help on this further. So in a nutshell, the role of parliamentarians, wherever they are, and again, Senator, you said it very nicely actually, worldwide, is to work together on the subject and to identify where which concrete need is and how to tackle that need. Because otherwise we end up talking that everybody talks about everything and everywhere. And that's not the solution. Pakistani needs are different from the ones of the Maldives, and Pakistani needs are different of the ones perhaps you have in Stockholm or in Oslo or in Madrid. So it is really about identification of the concrete needs. And then we can, on the executive side, on the government side, we can help with concrete measures and programs down to climate finance also. But it has to be clear what we are going to do and why and when. I would stop with this point. Again, thanking you for this invitation. Always great to be here in this panel, Mr. Soleri and SDPI. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zeiler. Any last one-liner from the honorable parliamentarians online? Any takeaway for way forward? Can I start with you, Mr. Koch?
Well, I would just like to say a huge, big thank you for inviting me, and I really hope that we can continue to have this conversation ongoing, because as I stated in my first intervention as well, the cooperation between Europe, United States, and all those countries that actually are responsible for the vast majority of the greenhouse gases being emitted since actually the 18th century. That was when we started to use fossil fuels. But the cooperation with these countries and other developing economies all around the world is very, very important to make this transition as fast as possible, but also not forgetting that it needs to be in justice, and that we need to do it together. But with those words, I unfortunately have to leave you. But thank you very, very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Ms. Gotaland, any last comment from you?
Yes, I would also like to say thank you And I must congratulate you to a very important and interesting panel and discussion here today. I think this is exactly what's needed. And I would like to echo what's been said about connecting also parliaments in this question, because I think we can help each other to be progressive against governments, but also like the question we talked about on trust, on how we rebuilt trust and climate financing and loss and damage, the discussion that was at COP. I think it's very helpful if it is the parliamentarians who discuss it. So I think that could facilitate a lot. And then I would just like to say that I truly believe that many of the things I heard today is will be very important in the transition. And yet what I mentioned earlier also is that we who will transit will also be the winners in the future. So yes, it will be difficult. Yes, it is about justice, about being fair, since the big emissions has, as Per also mentioned, been on the big emitters. But despite that, we need to see that we will win when we transist. So even if it's difficult during the travel, the goal to transist and to have the new technologies, phase out the fossil fuels, that will be extremely important also for the jobs, welfare, health. So therefore, in the end, we have something better to look forward to. So I stop on that, on a very positive message there, that the world will have a better place when we have went through this, will be in a better place when we have gone through this transition together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gotalan. The second last comment from Professor Bali, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes, I only want to take the advantage to say that we have very practical things. First of all, what I've learned that Pakistan has made many measures for the battle against climate change, but Pakistan can also benefit from these changes if you are investing in power plants for solar energy, hydrogen energy, producing hydrogen and transporting it to Germany, to the European Union. I think you can also gain working places for your people. You can gain money by this cooperation with the European Union. And I'm quite convinced that the hydrogen economy will be the future of our world.
Thank you very much, Professor Bale, for laying out the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, as you observed that in different European countries, they do have green parties. We don't have green party, but we are quite happy that many of these like-minded members across political spectrum, both from Treasury as well as from opposition benches, they would be launching the Energy Transition Caucus that would, inshallah, help us transitioning from fossil fuel to clean and renewable fuel. I thank you, GIZ, for actually bringing the honorable European MEPs and MPs so that they could exchange their thoughts with Pakistani parliamentarians. I hope this knowledge sharing would continue. And now I'll request you to give your concluding remarks so that we can conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suleri. And I think I would like to thank Sustainable Development Policy Institute to have organized this panel here, that we could do it together. And what I take away, which I take with me, is one thing. We just started with our climate and energy initiative. We just started with our cooperation. We just started with the first panel with parliamentarians from the EU, from Germany, from Pakistan. And what I took from this discussion, we shall continue and we will continue and we will continue together.
Form some sort of a group of these parliamentarians so that they can exchange their views directly.
Yes,
instead of relying on us.
of course. This is one thing of our initiative. And I would like to comment very, very quickly to a few points which were very interesting. I took a lot with me from this discussion today. One thing which is important, I arrived here in Pakistan just 3 months ago. I think after 3 days we met already for the first time, and directly the first idea was this panel today, because we knew that the elections in Germany would bring the new chancellor on the 8th of December and the new politics. But another thing is what I saw in Pakistan. Pakistan just started with the politics on climate change just now, and it's starting fast. It's starting very fast. So to Professor Balais about green economy, this is for sure one of the subjects of the future green hydrogen about what we talked. This is something which might start just now, and the message was very clearly understood. To Per Holmgren, what is very important also that we understood, we are at the point of the critical mass where suddenly the green finance is increasing exponentially, like we had a critical mass concerning political will with the Montreal Protocol in 1987. I was there already also engaged. I'm especially happy to have another meteorologist as in this discussion with Per Holmgren, who is there since decades already. So there are more meteorologists who drove the whole thing. Then another thing which should be very important, which I like to point out, let me see. Yes, we are talking about parliament. We are talking about the role of the parliamentarians, and it's very important what we understood for the parliamentarians to get voted, to see what the people want. But what we think, what is also as important as just looking what the people want, is also to communicate. And this was a big discussion yesterday in Germany. To communicate, to convince, if we are convinced from something which should change. And the way the world is changing very quickly. And I would like to say also a last word to the forerunners. Germany had a big political discussion 30 years ago when we started with the climate politics. We also, the opposition also told us, you have just 2% or 3% of the worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. You want to start Germany, you want to ruin Germany, but we said one country has to go ahead. So we had to go ahead. We went ahead with the Montreal Protocol to say voluntarily in the German parliament, we want to reduce more than the Montreal Protocol. And we went ahead with the climate politics. So it's very important to go together to go ahead. But we are at the best point we can think about with this critical mass where climate finance is getting a lot more. Thanks so much. And see you next year all together, and let's make up a process in between. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ratnut. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for the panelists. And if I can request my team to take the group photo, the professor is here, and all of us, if we can just stand and the team can take the picture.